My stepdad refused to pay for my medical treatment and told me I wasn't worth keeping alive. My mom watched him beat me and throw me out like trash. I was sick, bleeding, and alone. My name is Brinley Carter, and this happened when I was 16. I had been sick for months. Not the kind of sick you can ignore with painkillers and rest. I fainted a lot. My joints burned. Sometimes my vision went dark around the edges, like the world was slowly turning me off. Doctors kept asking for tests, scans, follow-ups. Each visit came with bills Wade didn't even open. He stacked them on the kitchen counter like junk mail and said I was too expensive to keep alive. That night, I collapsed in the living room. I remember the sound first, my head hitting the floor, sharp and hollow. I remember my mom gasping, but she didn't move. Wade stood over me, angry, like my body had personally offended him. I tried to sit up, tried to explain that I couldn't feel my hands, that something was really wrong. He started yelling about money, about how I wasn't even his real kid, about how I was ruining his life. When I threw up blood onto the carpet, he snapped. He kicked me hard in the ribs and grabbed my arm, dragging me toward the door. I was dizzy, barely conscious, my ears ringing. I looked at my mom, Elena, begging without words. She stood frozen by the hallway, hands clenched together, eyes wet, saying nothing. Not stop. Not my name. Nothing. Wade shoved a hoodie into my chest and dumped my medical papers at my feet like garbage. Get out, he said. If you die somewhere else. Then he slammed the door. I stood on the porch shaking, barefoot, blood on my sleeve, the cold biting through my skin. The house light stayed on. I could hear the TV inside. My mom never came after me. I walked until my legs gave out. I don't know how long I sat on the curb, hugging my knees, trying to breathe through the pain. Every part of me felt wrong. My body, my heart, my place in the world. I kept thinking maybe if I was stronger, healthier, quieter, this wouldn't have happened. Maybe I really was a burden. But deep down, something else hurt worse. It wasn't the illness. It wasn't the bruises forming along my side. It was knowing that the person who gave birth to me chose comfort over my life. That she watched someone hurt her child and decided silence was easier. That night changed everything. It was the moment I learned that love, to some people, has conditions. And once you become inconvenient, they let you bleed. I had been sick long before the night I was thrown out. It didn't happen all at once. My body started failing in quiet ways, the kind people don't take seriously at first. My legs ached like I had run miles, even when I stayed in bed. My chest felt tight for no reason. Sometimes the room would spin, and I would wake up on the floor with no memory of falling. The doctors kept saying we needed more tests. Blood work. Scans. Follow-up visits. Each appointment came with another bill. I stopped opening the mail because I could feel the tension in the house every time an envelope arrived. Wade would pick them up, sigh loudly, and drop them on the table like proof of my guilt. He never asked how I felt. He only asked how much it cost. At first, he acted concerned in front of others. He would tell people I was fragile or dramatic. At home, his tone changed. He said I was lazy. He said pain was an excuse. He said I liked attention. Slowly, his words made the house feel smaller. I learned to walk carefully, to sit quietly, to apologize for being sick. My mom saw everything. She watched me struggle to stand after fainting. She saw me hold my side in pain at night. Sometimes she would bring me water or sit beside me, but she never argued with Wade. When he complained about money, she stayed silent. When he mocked me, she looked away. Fear lived in her eyes, but she chose safety over speaking up. The worse my health got, the meaner Wade became. He controlled everything. What food we bought. When I could see a doctor. What I was allowed to say. He started calling me a burden openly, like it was my name. When bills piled up, he pointed at me and said I was the problem. I began to believe him. I remember one day fainting in the kitchen. I woke up on the floor with my head aching and my heart racing. Wade didn't help me up. He stepped over me and said I was doing it on purpose. My mom stood in the doorway, holding the wall, whispering my name but not coming closer. That was when I understood something had broken. My illness wasn't just ignored. It was used against me. Every symptom became proof that I was useless. Every doctor visit became a reason to treat me like less than human. I stopped asking for help because asking only made things worse. What hurt the most wasn't the pain in my body. It was knowing my mother saw what was happening and still chose to stay quiet. She chose peace in the house over my safety. I wasn't abandoned by strangers. I was abandoned by the one person who was supposed to protect me. After I was thrown out, I didn't have a plan. I just walked until my legs hurt too much to keep going. The city felt louder at night, like it didn't care who was lost inside it. I learned quickly which places stayed warm and which didn't. Bus stations were the easiest. No one asked questions if you stayed quiet and kept your head down. During the day, I moved between places where people wouldn't notice me. Laundromats were good because everyone was busy with their own clothes and their own lives. I sat on plastic chairs and pretended I was waiting for a load to finish. Sometimes I closed my eyes and rested my head against the wall, hoping no one would see how weak I felt. My body was getting worse. Without medicine or doctor visits, the pain spread. My joints swelled. My heart raced for no reason. I fainted twice in 1 week and woke up on cold floors with strangers stepping around me. No one stopped. I don't blame them. I learned that when you look homeless, people learn how not to see you. I found an old storage unit with a broken lock behind a row of closed shops. It smelled like dust and oil, but it was dry. At night, I curled up on the floor with my hoodie pulled over my head, trying to make myself small. Hunger became constant. I drank water to quiet it. When that didn't work, I slept so I wouldn't feel it. There were moments I thought about giving up. Not in a dramatic way. Just a quiet thought that maybe it would be easier to stop fighting my body and let it rest. I felt tired all the time. Tired of pain. Tired of moving. Tired of being unwanted. What hurt more than the cold was listening to other people talk. At the bus station, I heard a woman complain about her mom calling too much. A man talked on the phone about going home for the holidays. A kid laughed while his father promised to pick him up. I sat there, hugging my knees, feeling like I had been erased from that world. The shame was heavy. I washed my face in public bathrooms and checked my reflection, trying to look normal. I didn't want anyone to guess that I had nowhere to go. Being thrown away makes you feel like you deserve it, even when you know you don't. Each day became about small choices. Where to sit, when to move, how to breathe through the pain. I stopped thinking about the future. Survival was all I had. And in those quiet, unseen places, I learned what it feels like to disappear while still being alive. One morning, my body finally gave up on me. I had been walking for a long time, trying to get to a place where I could sit and rest. My vision blurred, and my chest felt tight, like someone was pressing down on it. I remember seeing the sign of a small clinic ahead of me. The lights were off. The doors were locked. I told myself to just make it that far. I didn't. I collapsed on the sidewalk before I reached the door. When I opened my eyes, someone was kneeling beside me. She was older, with tired eyes and a firm voice. She didn't look scared or annoyed. She looked focused. She asked my name and if I could hear her. I tried to answer, but my throat felt dry and weak. She didn't ask why I was there or where my parents were. She didn't ask what I had done wrong. She took off her jacket and placed it under my head, then checked my pulse like it was the most natural thing in the world. She called someone on her phone and spoke calmly, like she had done this many times before. Her name was Maribel Knox. She helped me sit up and gave me water, holding the bottle steady because my hands were shaking. When I apologized for being a problem, she told me to stop talking and save my strength. Her words were sharp, but her hands were gentle. I wasn't used to that combination. She took me somewhere safe. It wasn't fancy. Just a small room, clean sheets, and quiet. She cleaned my cuts and checked my vitals. She didn't rush. She didn't sigh. Every small action felt careful, like my body mattered. I kept waiting for the questions to come, for the moment she would change her mind once she knew the truth about me. But she didn't ask anything personal that day. She brought me soup and made sure I ate. When I cried without warning, she didn't tell me to calm down. She handed me a tissue and waited. I didn't trust it. Kindness had always come with a price. I stayed alert, ready to leave if her tone shifted or her patience ran out. But it never did. She checked on me through the night and made sure I was breathing steadily before she rested. For the first time in a long while, I slept without fear. The care was simple, but it was real. My pain eased a little. My body stopped shaking so much. More than that, something inside me loosened. Someone had seen me on the ground and didn't step over me. She didn't look away. I didn't know what would happen next. I still didn't trust hope. But one thing was clear. When everyone else decided my life wasn't worth the effort, one stranger chose to prove them wrong. As my body started to feel a little stronger, the fog in my head slowly cleared. I could sit up without feeling like the room would spin. I could eat without getting sick. The pain didn't disappear, but it stopped controlling every breath. That was when Maribel began to notice the details I had tried to hide. She saw the bruises first. Not fresh ones, but older marks in places that didn't make sense. When she gently asked how I got them, my mouth went dry. I told her I was clumsy. She didn't argue, but her eyes stayed on my face a moment longer than usual. She helped arrange proper medical care. Forms had to be filled out, records requested. I watched her read through old hospital papers, her jaw tightening as she went. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't curse. Her anger was quiet, controlled, and somehow heavier because of that. That was when the truth came out. The records showed that Wade was legally responsible for my care. It showed appointments that were canceled, treatments that were recommended but never approved, tests that were delayed until they no longer mattered. It was all there in ink and dates. Choices made again and again. Not mistakes. Decisions. I felt sick reading it. Part of me wanted to tear the papers up and pretend none of it existed. Seeing everything written down made it real in a way my memories alone never had. I wasn't just unlucky. I wasn't exaggerating. What happened to me had a name. Neglect. Maribel explained things calmly, like she was afraid of scaring me. She said certain patterns couldn't be ignored. That some questions had to be asked. I nodded, but inside I felt torn in half. Wanting answers felt like betrayal. Wanting consequences felt wrong, like I was being ungrateful for surviving. I had learned to stay quiet for a long time. Silence had kept the peace. Silence had kept me alive, or so I thought. Speaking up felt dangerous. I worried that if I pushed too hard, everything good would disappear again. Maribel didn't push me. She told me accountability wasn't the same as revenge. That protecting myself didn't make me cruel. She said wanting the truth didn't mean I wanted anyone hurt. It meant I wanted the harm to stop. Still, guilt followed me everywhere. I thought about my mother and wondered if this would ruin her life. I thought about Wade and felt a strange pull to defend him, even after everything. It scared me how deep that instinct ran. But something had changed. I wasn't alone anymore. Someone was standing beside me, not shouting, not demanding, just refusing to let the truth be buried. For the first time, I started to understand the difference between staying silent to survive and speaking up to live. My mother reached out only after people started asking questions. Phones rang. Letters arrived. Hospital staff wanted explanations. That was when her silence broke. She called me one afternoon. Hearing her voice made my chest tighten in a way pain medicine couldn't fix. She sounded unsure, almost gentle, like she was testing the ground before stepping. She said she had been confused. She said things had happened too fast. She said she felt trapped and didn't know what to do. I listened without interrupting. I had imagined this moment many times while sleeping on cold floors. I thought I would cry or yell. Instead, I felt strangely calm, like something inside me had already accepted the truth. She asked where I was staying. She asked if I was safe. She never said she was sorry. When we met, she looked smaller than I remembered. Tired. Her hands shook as she talked. She kept explaining herself, filling the space with reasons and fear. She said Wade controlled everything. She said she was scared of losing her home. She said she thought I would be okay somehow. I asked her one simple question. I asked if she knew I was sick. She said yes. I asked if she saw him hurt me. She nodded. Then I asked why she didn't stop it. She was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was low. She said staying was easier. Easier than fighting. Easier than starting over. Easier than being alone. That was the moment something broke cleanly inside me. It wasn't anger. It wasn't shock. It was clarity. I understood that what happened to me wasn't an accident or a misunderstanding. It was a choice made again and again. Not by someone who didn't know, but by someone who decided comfort mattered more than her child. She reached for my hand, and I pulled away. Not in a dramatic way. Just enough to show her the distance she had created. I told her I didn't hate her. I told her I didn't need her explanations. I told her I needed space. She cried then. Real tears. But they didn't move me. I had cried enough for both of us already. Walking away from that conversation felt different than being thrown out. This time, I was choosing myself. I wasn't running. I wasn't begging. I was stepping back and letting go of a hope that had been hurting me for a long time. For the first time, my heart went quiet. I stopped waiting for my mother to become someone she wasn't. I stopped wishing she would save me. In that space, painful as it was, I felt lighter. She had chosen comfort. I chose distance. With Maribel's help, I started writing everything down. Every detail I could remember, every hospital visit I had missed, every time Wade hurt me or ignored my pain. I wrote about being kicked out in the middle of the night, about sleeping on cold sidewalks, about the hunger and the fear. Each memory stung, but putting it on paper made it feel like I was holding something real in my hands, not just memories that kept me trapped. Maribel taught me how to organize it. We made a folder for medical neglect, another for the assaults, another for the eviction and other moments of abandonment. Every page had dates, times, and notes about what happened. Some nights, I cried while writing. Some nights, I sat quietly, feeling the power of taking control for the first time in months. When we finished, she helped me contact lawyers who could help. I met them in a small office with windows that let in the morning light. They listened without judgment. They asked questions that made me uncomfortable, but I answered anyway. Every form I signed, every question I answered, felt like a tiny act of taking back something Wade had stolen from me. Meanwhile, Wade acted as if nothing mattered. He continued with his life, still smug, still convinced I couldn't do anything. He didn't see me, not really, not in the way that mattered. He thought I was weak and silent. He didn't know that every piece of paper, every phone call, every small step I took was slowly building something he couldn't control. The work was not exciting or dramatic. It was slow. It was careful. We made copies, filled out applications, and gathered statements from people who had seen signs of what happened. Maribel reminded me that patience was part of the process. The law moves slowly, she said, but it moves. Sometimes I felt angry while writing. Other times I felt scared. I thought about what Wade would say if he knew. I imagined him laughing, assuming I had no power. That image kept me steady. Each signature, each form, each memory I documented became a quiet rebellion. I wasn't screaming at him. I wasn't confronting him face to face. I was building a foundation that he couldn't touch. Through it all, I learned that power didn't come from yelling or hitting back. It came from taking what was stolen and holding it steady. It came from telling the truth and letting the people who could do something act. For the first time, I felt like I had a role in shaping what would happen next. Even though nothing had changed in the house yet, even though Wade still acted like a king in his little world, I could feel the tide shifting. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was becoming someone who could make sure the truth mattered. And that thought, more than anything, gave me hope. Slowly, things started to change. Wade, who had always acted untouchable, began to slip. It wasn't dramatic at first. Small things, calls from landlords, questions from employers, letters from authorities, started piling up. He couldn't shout or threaten his way out anymore. The same walls that had kept me trapped now carried the weight of his actions back to him. I watched as people who had once looked the other way began asking questions. Each call, each inquiry, felt like a quiet victory. He tried to act calm, still smiling in public, but there was tension in the way he moved. He started missing meetings, forgetting appointments, snapping at colleagues. His confidence, the thing he had used to scare me, was cracking under pressure he couldn't control. Then my mother tried to step in. Elena reached out with her usual soft voice, framing it like concern. She told me she didn't want him to get into trouble, that she wanted to help him, and suggested I could stay silent, protect the family. Her words felt familiar, but this time they had no power over me. I saw her fear, the same fear that had kept her silent before. But now, I didn't need her protection or her excuses. I told her no. Firmly, quietly, but without hesitation. I said I wouldn't hide the truth. I wouldn't help him escape the consequences. She looked at me, shocked, hurt, maybe even a little afraid. That moment, I realized something had shifted. I wasn't the scared girl hiding in corners anymore. I had control over my own story, and I wasn't giving it away. Every day after that, I noticed more cracks in Wade's mask. People he had trusted began questioning him. Papers he had ignored were finally read. Calls he had tried to avoid came through. His arrogance, the same arrogance that made me feel worthless, was starting to fail him. I didn't celebrate or laugh. I didn't want revenge the way movies show it, loud, angry, explosive. This was quieter, slower, but far stronger. Truth was surfacing piece by piece, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. Every moment he tried to act like nothing was happening, reality was quietly catching up. Even my mother couldn't stop it. She could bargain, plead, and make excuses, but the facts were already out. She had chosen comfort over courage once, but now the truth didn't need her help. It didn't need anyone's help. Watching it unfold was strange. I felt calm, almost detached. The fear and pain of the past months still lingered, but I could see the world tipping back toward justice. Wade's mask was slipping, and no amount of anger or money could hold it in place. I realized then that revenge didn't need violence. It didn't need screaming or fighting. Sometimes letting the truth rise methodically, quietly, and inevitably was more powerful than anything else. And that truth was unstoppable. Wade couldn't hide anymore. The calls, letters, and questions finally caught up to him. He faced the consequences of his actions one by one. Legal papers came in, forcing him to answer for refusing to care for me. Financial penalties followed, making him realize how much he had lost by ignoring his responsibilities. People in his community who had once looked up to him began to turn away, questioning the man they thought they knew. I watched all of this quietly. I didn't feel the need to shout or gloat. I didn't feel joy in his pain. Instead, there was relief. A weight I hadn't known I was carrying lifted. For years, fear and anger had been tied to his power over me. Now that power was gone. I could breathe again without it feeling dangerous. My mother had to face her own choices too. She couldn't hide behind excuses or fear anymore. She was forced to see how staying silent had hurt me. I didn't yell at her or confront her harshly. I simply acknowledged what had happened and kept my distance. The detachment wasn't cruel. It was self-protection. It was letting her live with the reality she had chosen while I moved forward. For me, the changes were more than legal or social. My health began to improve. With proper care and rest, my body healed slowly. The chronic pain that had once dominated every day started to fade. Fainting became rare. Nights were no longer spent curled up on cold floors. I still carried scars, both visible and invisible, but they were reminders of survival, not constant fear. The most important thing I realized was that justice doesn't fix everything. It doesn't erase the hurt or the betrayal. It doesn't make up for lost time or stolen security. But it does stop the bleeding. It stops the world from turning against you when you are already down. It reminds you that choices have consequences, and that some people cannot escape the truth forever. I began to focus on myself, slowly building a life where I wasn't defined by fear or neglect. I found routines, spaces, and people who treated me with respect. I didn't need to watch Wade suffer to feel safe. Seeing the system work, seeing the truth surface, was enough. For the first time in years, I felt steady. I could plan, breathe, and move forward without looking over my shoulder. The past was still there, but it no longer controlled me. Justice had come, and that was enough to finally feel a measure of peace. Life after everything felt strange at first. There were no loud arguments, no sudden shocks, just quiet days where I could make choices for myself. I started small, deciding when to eat, when to rest, and when to leave a place that didn't feel safe. Each decision reminded me that I was in control, that I didn't have to wait for anyone to save me. I slowly built a routine. I found a small apartment that I could afford, a place that felt like mine. I picked out furniture, kept it simple, but it was clean and steady. I went to appointments on my own, cooked my meals, and started caring for my body in ways I hadn't been able to before. Every day was a quiet victory, a small piece of stability that no one could take away. I learned to choose who could be close to me. Friends, coworkers, and neighbors who treated me with respect became my chosen family. I didn't need to fill spaces with people who had once hurt me. I didn't need my mother or stepfather to define my life. I built boundaries that kept me safe, and I kept them firm. Wade and Elena stopped being villains in my head. They were just people who had made their choices. I didn't fear them anymore. I didn't hope for apologies or change. Their role in my life had ended the day I decided I was worth protecting. I didn't need revenge, and I didn't need reconciliation. I only needed freedom. I started thinking about the future in ways I never had. I planned my days, my work, my rest, and even small joys. I realized family wasn't just blood or shared space. It was who stood with me when it mattered, who respected me when others had abandoned me. I chose those people carefully and let the rest fade into memory. There were times I still felt anger or sadness. That never completely goes away, but it no longer ruled me. I could look at the past without panic, without tears that came from fear. I could see what had happened, understand it, and still move forward. Owning my survival felt different from forgiving. I didn't forgive Wade or Elena. I didn't need to. I simply decided that my life belonged to me, and no one else could take it. That quiet ownership, knowing I had made it through, that I could stand on my own, was stronger than anything else. For the first time, I felt complete in a way I hadn't before. I had survived, I had reclaimed myself, and I was free to choose the life I wanted. And that was enough.